Anything or vendor?
Generally smarter than us.
You're like,
Not for us.
Are we good to go? Okay, it is 4:02, calling the meeting to order. Please note, there's only going to be one absent member who couldn't be here today, and that would be Vice Mayor Kelly Carrillo. Note for the present. And we will now go into oral communications. This is the opportunity to address the audit committee on any scheduled matter. Unless additional time is authorized by the committee, all commentary shall be limited to 3 minutes per individual and no more than 15 minutes total. We don't have anyone in here. Do we have anyone on virtually?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. We'll now move on to scheduled matters. The approval of the draft minutes of January 24, 2024. Committee members have had time to review. Do we have a motion? If there are no changes or anything else.
make the motion.
We have a motion by member Luke and a second by member Taylor. No further discussion. Please signify approval by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll now move on to number 2, the review of the PSW lease agreement. Would that be yours?
That would be me. Well,
Okay,
I guess
so-
me and Jason.
So,
Okay.
at our last meeting, the committee requested that it reach out to PSW due to the expiration of their lease of the property at 130 Northeast Street. And so, City Attorney Wu had provided a draft lease that met the current day legislation guidelines. Provided that to PSW, had a conversation with their executive director this week, and their attorney, Alan Bailey, was going to review it, and it looks like he reviewed it
He did.
and spoke with Ms. Liu.
He did. He talked to me. We talked yesterday and then he provided this late last night or late in the evening yesterday. So, the concerns that he expressed to me were the same that had been expressed by Don to Jason. So I explained why we needed to do a new lease, especially since the old lease is from 1965. So there wasn't a whole lot of pushback on that. But I think he just felt like obligated to bring it up because it was, his client had wanted to keep everything kind of like the, more or less the same. So I explained why we needed that. So they were okay with that. I did tell them that we understood, though, that given the circumstances of what they wanted to do, that it would, if the committee was good with that, it would mean some changes. So, and so I invited Alan to make the changes. And so he did make some changes. I'm not surprised by any of them. We've talked about everything and we can kind of go through it if you guys want to. So, he did ask about wanting to, he was proposing that they just simply say for their charitable purposes. I mentioned that I wasn't sure that was going to be enough. So it looks like when he did his red line, he did provide for the benefit of persons with disabilities. If we think that's sufficient, we can go on, but that's really that's
Excuse me,
discretion.
does everybody have a copy of this?
I believe so, yeah.
I don't understand.
Good.
Oh.
And that was consistent with my conversation
Thank you.
with Mr. Sowers as well.
Yeah,
And that was what the understanding of the prior agreement was.
right. So, so they did add, but if we wanted it to be more specific, we could propose that. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. It's kind of whatever, however everybody feels here. I'm okay with what the red, the provision that he provided. So, yeah. We did talk about the length of time and that to keep it, so that it's in compliance with the provisions of the Surplus Land Act, that it would need to be for no more than 15 years. And so they are proposing the max again. I'm not surprised at all about that. We talked about the fact that given that they do not, they are really wanting the same deal they've had before. And so, which is, and we are doing that with the other nonprofits that we're allowing licenses or leases of our property. So, again, it's not really my call on that, but if we were to allow that, then it doesn't make sense to put in the CPI and annual adjustments that we have in our standard lease. So I'd be fine if we're going to stick with the same format of compensation that we keep it at, not applicable with regard to the increases. This is another property where there's a discussion about who built the property and who built the facility, and no one seems to have records. he was gonna look for them, because I told him, look, it only helps them if they've got those records. So, so Alan was also gonna try to see if they could track anything down.
Is that why he changed real property to land?
Maybe, yeah, possibly.
Because Dawn, my conversation with Dawn, their understanding is that we had a long time lease to them and they built the facility.
Yeah, we would need confirmation of that, and I wouldn't propose that change without the confirmation, by the way, I meant to mention that one, yeah. So, we're gonna have to take a look at that,
And then $1 a year, that's consistent with what we have done with Chimney.
Right. and that's kind of regardless of whether we own the building or not,
Correct.
right?
Is there a reason why the city just doesn't sell on that property?
We have to comply with the circle of land.
Oh, that's right.
Definitely.
Okay, I understand. That's right. I forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is our problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So use of the premises, I didn't really have anything there to mention. Maintenance, so they've added in this language about their desired maintenance and repair, although they did go ahead and leave the stuff in that says, but if there's something that needs to be done by law, they would do it. So I, just wanted to point that out for any discussion, if anybody has any concerns about that. I don't really have an issue legally with it.
That'll be my question is, when I reviewed it, because what was struck in there is about all building codes, the American Disabilities
Yeah.
Act. Does that place the city in
Well, they got rid of it, but then they said that it'll be responsible, and that if there was something that needed, I think they left in the language later that said
Oh,
if there's
yeah,
something that
the
needed to be
last
done, they would do it, right? So, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, if we really want to keep it in there, we can, but I think it's probably covered.
They would be covered in the last part of it?
Let me find it. Where did it go? Sorry, I read it earlier today. Oh, yeah. Lessee will be responsible for complying with all
Okay.
codes or laws requiring alterations, maintenance, or restoration of the premises during the term of the lease at no cost to lessor. So it's already in there
Okay.
under that. And then there's also the cast language
Yeah.
in there later. So it's probably fine. It was just, yeah.
Okay.
And then I did have one little minor change in the that paragraph below the second paragraph of 3.1. Because I think what we need to say there is that it at least includes use of all existing furniture, fixtures, and equipment, lessee accepts responsibility of maintenance and a replacement of FF and E as set forth above. We don't need to keep saying desired, because the problem is it starts to confuse the issue there, because there's some things could be required.
Correct.
And that's all specified up above. But then I'm okay with it on the next one where they're talking about custodial service. That's fine. Okay, so insurance. They don't know whether it's possible, but I told him very clearly that we would require it. I don't know how we get around that.
Why would it not be possible?
He thought they already had it. He doesn't know for sure, and he wanted to go check. I think that's why he has that notation there. So, but I told him that it doesn't matter who owns the building, we would require insurance on that building because we own the land. It would be, and these are our standard minimums. So we'll have to find out if there's an issue there, and I guess he'll let us know if there's an issue there, and then we'll have to go from there, but he understood that when we talked. And I told him that's a requirement for everybody. He made a small change on the next page concerning business days, wanting business, and I'm fine with that. So, okay, on the governing law, he wanted the South County Justice Center specified, but the problem with that is that, it specifies Tulare County already,
Yeah.
but the South County Justice Center would not have venue over federal claims. So we need to clarify. I think we can work with that one. So I get it. I prefer it. Frankly, I'd prefer for you guys that it be in Porterville too, but I don't know that we really have much control over that. The courts kind of designate where it's supposed to go. But we can clarify that language. And then they put in clarifying language with regard to the notice for their lessee. I think that's about it. So really minor changes for the most part. So, you know, with getting some conditions on getting some clarifications, we don't have to bring this back, I don't think, unless there is an issue with insurance or an issue, you know. I think otherwise we could probably recommend that I go to council once we've heard back from the tenant, make sure they're good with whatever needs to be done.
Okay, to the members, are you good with that? That it doesn't have to come back to us and once the changes. are made?
Unless there's
A
a
big
major
something
issue.
that has to come back,
Yeah,
and that's what will happen.
well, would we like to do an approval to
We
recommend
need
it?
to have
For
enough,
council consideration pending the resolution of those issues?
yeah,
I can make that motion since I just said it out loud.
yes. We have a motion on the floor, and the second. No further discussion, signify approval, yes, by saying yes.
Aye.
Yeah. All right, we'll now move on. By the way, thank you for that. And that what we received was the draft that you had prepared, huh?
Yeah, originally for someone,
Yeah.
for somebody
But I
else.
appreciate that. No, what we had got in our packet is what we had prepared, and that's
That
why
was
we
the
got this.
original kind of, used that.
Probably for Centennial Plaza or something. It
Okay,
was for summer. Was it for these guys? Okay.
all right.
It came from, it has been a while. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and introduce the item and then I'm going to turn it over to Eureka, who has done all the heavy lifting on this specific item. So it's been quite an undertaking, to say the least.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the review process for the community civic events. So what we were directed to do was look at creating a parallel process similar to that for community civic events. However, this one would be for special events. And what staff is looking at as a special event, it would be one that would really benefit more of a private business rather than a benefiting the community at large and being sponsored by a nonprofit. So it's a little bit different. And so I know Eureka did a lot of research. She went out and rather than recreating the wheel, did look at what other agencies were doing. The nearest agency that we did locate that we felt was probably what more toward what we were looking at was the city of Visalia. And they just did work on that fairly recently. And so she'll go ahead and speak about that. And then we'll do basically more of a high level review. Rather than getting really deep in the weeds, because that would probably take hours. Let's see, so we did to begin the process, Eureka reached out to all of the departments and to basically get costs in terms of a small event, a medium-sized event, and a large event. And she can elaborate on how we kind of identified those different parameters and just went citywide by department, trying to determine how much in-kind costs are associated with each of those size events. And it's scary.
It is, because I was looking at
Yeah.
at that, and I should appreciate that cost breakdown.
And so if we are then going to consider the costs associated with putting on these civic events that benefit the community, if we are going to look at a process for a special event that really doesn't benefit the community, but rather benefits a private business, we're going to have to recover costs. And so it's just a matter of what you want to do. So Eureka, you want to take it over?
Yeah, so based off at the last meeting, we had talked about how we had done research on some other cities and how they conduct their special events and their pricing structure. So based off of that, I kind of tailored the application to go off of that, but also based off of our current community civic event application. So it's very similar to the one we have now, but there's just additional information that is asked. If you look at the application, the front face, that also is a working document. So this can change, the fees can change. I also forgot to add that these, if this were the process we went with, it would have to be approved by council as well. So that wasn't mentioned, but that would be included as well. So we just kind of wanted to make sure it kind of, I guess, mimic what we already have, but just adds additional information. based off of the different departments, we came up, or we got that fee structure. And that is also something that could change. Each department kind of gave me a breakdown of what it would cost each time that there's a large event. So for example, a large event would be like the Spring Festival. A medium event would be considered Veterans Day, and then the Christmas parade would be a small event. So it would require less staff and would require less from the city. So if you look at the list, it has kind of a cost breakdown, but that is something that could change based on what the applicant would want to have. So it's just very kind of just goes over employees, staff, time, having to have refuse go out. It's just kind of has all of that in there. And then at the end of that, it kind of breaks it down on how those numbers were computed. So you could see that the large event is almost $10,000. A medium event runs at $6,000, and then a small event is around $2,000. This kind of will help us determine if council wants to set how much an application would cost, how much we would try to recover if we did decide to go forward with this. It just kind of gives you an overview of what fees are being expensed on behalf of the city.
And another thought was to break it out by service. So we could basically a la carte it. If they, for example, if they're having an event that really would require security, we could put in, they could check, yes, if they're going to be, they must provide it. And then if they're going to provide their own, or if they require city personnel, and then we would have a cost associated with what that would cost based on the hours. So we could a la carte it, if you will. So there's a couple of different ways, or just a flat rate, depending on
I have
what
a
the.
question. With regard to security, you indicated that they could have their own security, or they can choose staff, city. Is there a list of security people that would be provided to them if they choose to
We
get on their, or they
usually
can go
don't
get their own?
get into
That's
recommending.
what okay.
So, but what we would have is they would have to be licensed.
That's
Yeah,
the question.
yeah,
Okay,
right.
thank you. That's all.
Yeah.
Where the Hells Angels are.
Exactly.
And to be clear, there was probably still.
That's worked out so
some-
well on the past.
Some police department involvement
Right.
as well, even though there's a
Patrol.
security. Policy
Okay.
patrol.
Yeah.
That was my concern, because we get with regard to the,
Well, the other thing about a la carte, I liked actually the idea of a la carte. However, it can't be this thing where it's like they get to elect what
Right,
they're
no,
going to do.
there's certain
There
mandatory.
would be certain things, it would just be that they may have the ability or to provide something on their own. You know what I'm saying? I think
Yeah.
we're gonna have to be really clear about
Yeah.
how that works. I like that better, because then it's not so one side, I mean,
right.
because one size really doesn't fit all. So, but I do think we're gonna have to be very clear that like, it's gonna be based on what the city is requiring, and then whether or not you are able to, by virtue of the legal requirements, or capable of providing.
Another option
Yeah.
too, that, Rico found in another community was, we have the estimated cost based off the history of events and huge civic events that we've been involved with. So we can come up with that cost and have that be essentially the cost as a deposit. And then the department bill to that event.
And then
And if
refund.
it comes back that it was less staff time, then, you know what I mean?
can
If
true
it's
up.
not one I've then you can provide a refund.
That's us.
Because we're not looking at revenue generation.
No. Yeah.
It's cost recovery.
Have any questions, Mr. David?
Well, kind of along the same lines as yours, if someone was to, say, okay, for example, special event fencing, they have their own special event fencing, there would be some sort of, something that you guys would definitely,
Yeah, it would have to
Right.
meet, you'd have to meet the specifications.
you would give them some.
We would give them
What
guidelines.
they're.
And then some of these are the barricades. So, so the barricades, would be required. I don't see how, more likely it would be provided by the city, because those are barricades that are heavy and filled, and they're to close streets down. And so there's a difference between closing the street down and then putting up a fencing around. But you're right, some of the events do require a fencing around it. And currently what we often do is have the applicant be required for that fence. So, but here
It's eye-opening. I don't think we've ever looked at really what cost is attributed to putting on a civic event.
Yeah,
Well, and I can appreciate the information to where it's at now than when we first got it. It was like, oh my gosh, there's a lot. So I want to thank you for bringing it to where it's at now. And we can look at it.
so are we treating the cost differently for civic events than special events? What's the proposal?
It's the same service. So
Understood.
yeah, so what we looked at was to try to back into, because without a community purpose,
Right.
or then we have to, required by law, to have cost recovery.
Right.
So we thought we have an ability to look at past events, because special event and a civic event follow the same
Right, but
path.
my question, so is our intention that we are gonna charge for civic events that are nonprofit sponsor or that have our,
That has
city
not-
sponsor?
that has not been.
okay, I just wanted to make draw that distinction.
Right.
I didn't think so.
that wasn't our direction. I mean. our
Well, no, I don't think we should
No.
necessarily,
No,
because
no.
Because by virtue of, when you're doing a community civic event and the city is sponsoring it, in order for the city to sponsor it, there's a public purpose.
Right.
That's been attributed to that.
That's,
So that is a justification for not charging. I just wanted, but I wasn't,
So that's what we used that to back into, because without a
Right.
public purpose.
you're using your
we-
examples and what you
By-
got are all
yeah.
your community civic events. I got you.
Because we want to be compliant with the law.
Yeah.
yeah,
And I
Yeah,
think just
let's
looking at
get
the fees
it
helps.
closed. I'm sure you've gone down basically the annual events that we
Well,
all.
that's what,
that's how we came up with large, medium, small, based on our, the usual suspects, if you will.
So who's getting,
well, like the spring festival looks to cost around $9,900.
Yeah.
and you
But
guys
they,
like
but we
the-
wouldn't charge for that because that's it's a benefit to the community.
okay, that's what I'm wondering.
No,
We're-
so these are,
We're
so.
looking at it for scope.
Who's getting it?
That's exactly what.
Who's gonna get it right?
Yeah. These are events on the They were just, I think it's really, we better make that really clear. just for the record.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
simply for reference, a reference point to figure out how much the cost of service that the city is providing, how much does that cost?
Right.
Because when you look at it from the other perspective of a special event, which is purely for a private business, they are the benefactor.
Sure.
We can't provide that service without cost recovery,
Right.
right?
I'm with you, Martha, and this is great. When it was first brought up, I was like, oh, God. This is amazing.
So I think it just helps kind of look at it, because
Oh, yeah.
if you can't just really throw a number and be like, oh, let's just charge this much.
Mhm.
I think now that we see, okay, we have this many officers attending just one event, that's for the community. If someone has something private and they want officers there, or if they just to deliver the barricades or to, go and drop off the trash bins and pick them up, that all has a cost associated to it. So it just kind of helps look at what that looks
The
like.
other thing is the definition of community civic event and special events. So special events can still involve nonprofits and may need to in some respects, but they won't be community civic events without city sponsorship. City sponsorship will be what would then exempt you from
So
the fees,
That,
right?
that
Is
gets
that correct?
correct. Well, and that's maybe something that we need to address
Right.
and look
Yeah.
at is
The
Really?
definitions.
like nailing down the definitions. The community civic event ordinance has been in place for a very long time, and maybe we should look at that to
Mhm.
clearly delineate.
Or, I mean, because the other option, just throwing out there, and I'm just literally talking off the top of my head right now, but you could do, if it was solely benefiting a nonprofit or within the city or something. I mean, there's potentially, you could look at a different that's why I'm bringing it up, because we need to line out what the definition is going to be and how we're going to make the distinction.
Yeah.
So, we know that we've had combination private nonprofit, which clearly has been benefiting businesses, the private business as well as a nonprofit. And I agree that needs to be what triggers a special event, the fees for cost recovery. what do we want, but what if we have something that is, I mean, are we gonna do this with all, we just have to figure that out. And maybe we need to look at what other cities are doing. Some purposes not,
And what if it
necessary in
were
this.
3 businesses downtown that decided to hold an event with, and also share some of the revenue generated with a nonprofit? What
I mean,
is
that's still a
that?
special event. I think as long as there's private fund, there's private benefit. I don't think you wanna, invite the ability to get around it by just simply getting a nonprofit involved and saying, oh, we're really gonna give you a portion of the
Right.
proceeds.
Yeah.
So, but I do think that we need to look at, well, what about if, there's a solely 501c3? I mean, do we want to look at how we're charging that? Because is there still a public benefit notwithstanding the cities? And so, and I don't know what cities are doing. I'm just putting it out there. We probably ought to take a look at that and see.
It's not as straightforward. as-
It's not, but it's crazy how many things you can.
Yes.
But somebody will
Because
bring it up if
also-
we don't think about it.
Well,
So-
because also
There'll be a
we-
lot of questions from people in the
Yeah.
community. There will be
Right.
questions.
Yeah.
As to the separation and as to which is what.
Right.
Which I can appreciate the application for them to check off.
Right.
And
Well-
we don't always know what the relationship is, because we know what is being represented to the city to possibly fit into a certain box. However, we don't know
Right.
what has been negotiated between the nonprofit and the.
I mean, and maybe it
Applicant.
becomes an issue of if it's something the city feels it's able to sign on to, that's all you need. So if the city has to be a co-sponsor, right? So if the city's not comfortable co-sponsoring it, but we have to have, then we need to know what our objective standards are for making that analysis. So we're gonna, at some point, even if we simplify it from that standpoint, we're still gonna have to think about what that actually means.
If I'm thinking about, some of the events that go on, say at, a park, in the park. You're probably not gonna need to block off streets, and you're not gonna need some of the other things that are on there. But- So that would fall under maybe the small event.
Yeah.
Well, and
Even
some of them
small
too, so say, Rico has a definition, and why she included. That if it was an event of lesser than 150 people, it was at a park that's for that intended use. That it wouldn't fall under this parameters.
Yeah, so
Correct.
that's on the front page. So it says, so if you're just having like a birthday party at a park or something else, you just put in your regular fee, you pay to reserve your place. But if it's something that exceeds that, then that's when it would turn into a permit versus just going and getting your arbor and reserving it that way.
For example, if you're, taking up the entire park and you need police department, you need.
Well, here's,
And it's open to the public. That's also a trigger.
Like a car show at Veterans Park.
Yeah.
yeah, but what happens is, can you have a situation where you have a family that decides they're gonna have a couple of cakes out there and then the whole world shows up at their party?
Yeah.
I don't know that we've ever had that happen, but.
No, so-
So.
But police usually would respond to that and ask for some type of
Because
permission.
that would be an end run around the special permit
Mhm.
process, right?
Leave it to the lawyer to think.
I know,
Yeah.
sorry to make things complicated.
No, but it's good because we need to know. We
This is
need
great.
to
Yeah.
know that. And then, of course, I'm grateful to the finance person who sits here because once this gets going, if it does get going,
That'll all
Well,
come
those
through
are the-
finance.
Those that oppose it are gonna say, well, so we give them tax money for blah, blah, blah. But this pretty much, this diffuses a lot of.
Yeah,
lot
you're
of
not just spending your
this.
tax money, you're spending everybody else's tax money.
Exactly.
We're just trying to be transparent.
well, you are, and I think this is good because it breaks it out by department. And
I think there's further detail too on the.
Yeah, on
applicants,
the back, it has how it was broken down, like so, and it printed out smaller than I thought it was going to.
I was gonna.
Yeah,
say-
that's not happening.
I looked at it like, that's small.
That is tiny.
So it kind of shows you like,
A magnifying glass with
I
my
have another
glasses.
question, then what about a private, well, say the fair? Okay, they have their thing, right? Does the city incur any additional expenses for
Yes,
that, and does the fair pay the city for
I
that?
believe that they do.
Yeah, they go.
We have an agreement with them
Correct.
for use, so it's a little bit different because we have like an actual
And I believe
operations
that,
agreement.
and then they contract with this department as well.
And they get billed for the police officers that are.
Yeah,
So any private company, whatever, that have their own thing on their own, right?
well, and
They
and
still
that's,
might need some
yeah,
support.
It just.
they're a nonprofit,
That
right?
would, it wouldn't, that
Yeah.
wouldn't fall
Yeah.
under a special event.
That's another thing.
Yeah, well, but they are a nonprofit, so it's a good point, but even
Yeah.
them, and that's a good example, they're a sole nonprofit that is reimbursing the city.
We at the park, currently, the only way somebody could host an event is to have a civic event, that would be an open, because it's considered using public space, you have to have that nonprofit attached, nobody can just come and say, I want to host an event for 100 people. I'm guessing that's what this would allow, but we might have to have a fee for the rental of the park right now. It's just per arbor. And
Oh.
you
that's a good
you
point.
can't, the only people that can rent the whole park are nonprofits because they've gone through a community.
I didn't even know that we.
The
can-
definition
I
of
don't
that,
know that we can block off the.
You
parks
can't.
For private
you
use,
can't.
because that's a,
Even the sports complex, we're not blocking you out, you're paying for parking, but you're not paying to enter.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's like a.
So we wouldn't
stipulation with the
allow,
park.
we would
Yeah.
never allow, like, we can do it, we've done it with parking lots occasionally, but we really have to be careful. She's got a good point. I mean, it
Yeah.
really should be, if it's not a public benefit type situation where it's open to the public.
So if there's some type of paying, like
Yeah.
pay to enter, that would kind of like, I don't know how.
Potentially create an issue. We've never done that, right? We've never had
Mm-mm.
the park blocked off where we've charged an entry fee.
Not that I'm aware of,
Yeah,
because of these reasons, because it's a public space.
we don't even do that with the city streets.
Right.
We're city parking lots, right?
Right.
So yeah, public
We've done it with the
spaces,
city-
yeah.
We've never done it with the city lot either, have we?
The city has never sponsored.
Once?
Well, the lot behind
For the.
This will open up some
Yeah.
issues with that. We'll have.
the Mecca's event, right?
Oh,
They-
correct.
That'd be the
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
rare occasion where somebody had to pay.
And they
Yeah.
charge an entry fee.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the difference of a special event.
So
Yeah.
make it, blocks it off and then.
Well, I thought that's what would trigger it. So in the application it asks, is there an admission fee? And I think that kind of helps makes a difference. Okay, well, is this gonna be private or public?
but
Because if you're
Amy's
charging.
point is that
Well,
we
yeah,
can't
but-
even close it off. Like, we
Yeah.
couldn't even allow them, even if we were getting our cost recovery, there's an issue with access to the public because we're inhibiting
Cause we always
For
say
the
like first
entire,
come,
they
first
could
served.
do a portion, they can't take the entire.
maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they could do a pavilion. That
Oh,
would be
there you go.
considered
Yeah.
rental
We can't-
space.
But wasn't it only a
That's
portion?
only a
Was it,
portion.
when the Mecca did it, was it the entire
Was it-
lot?
Oh, okay, it was a
Okay.
portion. All right.
All
Yeah,
right,
we'd have to get creative. If you wanted to apply like a fee, I don't know how they would just take the little pavilion for an event of 500 people. but,
Yeah,
We could,
Yeah.
I'm sure if we,
or could you take
creative.
two?
Yeah,
and leave-
that's how we charge
Yeah.
for like the car show that's coming up. They do pay for those 2 pavilions. We consider them reserved to the nonprofit sponsoring that car show. And then that's how they have their
Okay.
community civic event.
okay,
And then in other communities, you go to like sporting events, like tournaments and things. If you go to a specific area
Mhm.
where like the
Mhm.
fields are, you pay an entry fee.
Yeah, like to see the football game. I mean, they
Right.
might have charged at the football games that were back in the day at the back of the sports complex. I don't recall. They had that area fenced off and we had a lease agreement
So
with them.
there is for youth
Football.
football, for youth tackle
Mhm.
football, there is a fee
Mhm.
for the parents to get in.
Mhm.
But again, it's a portion thereof.
Mhm.
It's not, you're not restricted access to the property.
There's so much to take in. And yet I can appreciate this discussion here because we're hearing from the other departments. Wow. Okay, any other questions to this regard? Because where do we go from here?
I feel as though it should come back here when.
Yeah,
Before we
yeah.
take it to the council,
I agree.
yeah. So the next meeting we'll have it.
do some further
Fine-tuning.
Yeah, we
refinements.
could do some further refinements. Is there any direction that the committee would like to advise the staff? Is there anything you'd like to add or that you see that would have changed? That was presented today as we go through to recommend it.
What are the highlights in here?
Just in
Yeah.
Okay.
it's truly in draft.
How about
Yeah.
the definition?
Yeah, something.
Well, I
Take a
think we
look
need
at
to
the
figure out
definition.
that and look at what other cities are doing.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the only thing I had in
Maybe
mind.
even take some of the things we do and use them as an example.
Yeah,
Christmas break, yeah, small one, $2,000, whatever.
yeah,
Mhm.
and then
Spring,
maybe,
Spring, whatever that is.
yeah. And then maybe break down an event and kind of the all of our models that we talked about, and then maybe provide like little blurbs on guidance.
Yeah.
We could start working on
This is
that.
looking at some of the fees that are associated, not all those would be for one event. For example, like a podium or like trailer, not everybody's gonna need it.
You know, we could get those things, it's nice if they're even enough, you
But
What is
Already
number?
knows it
It's-
well.
know.
Yeah.
Or lights.
you need a podium?
On the sidewalk. I guess that falls into the little small events.
Okay, with that being said, other matters to be bringing back.
Oh, we're gonna create regulatory, I noticed this, we're gonna need to create some regulatory language in the ordinance on.
Okay.
municipal code.
Yeah.
And is there any direction on, and I guess that would be on the amount of days, like 60 days, 90 days on how long an
Okay, the
applicant
process.
has to turn in their application, or is that something we want to discuss later?
So what is it now for civic events?
30 days.
30?
Yeah.
Is 30 enough?
Is 30
I don't
Should it
days
be at
enough?
least 45?
I would
45 to
say,
60 days?
I would say at least 60,
Yeah,
because
Days.
even if I know staff, when they know of a regular event that's happening, annually, they contact
Yes,
them.
they
And,
reach out.
and even then, we don't get it until 2-3 weeks before the
Oh,
event.
gosh.
So,
And then they want.
Or after the last council meeting before the event,
That's
and then we
always
have
how
to
it
add
is.
it as an
Yes.
emergency.
Okay, then 60 days would be.
that's why I like that.
60.
Okay.
And then
Be
we
in there
would be
to
consistent,
expedite it.
maybe we
Yeah.
amend the community civic event timeline as well.
Yeah.
Because it's the same ordinance, right? The same section.
All right, we have the lease agreement that if there's anything that doesn't need to be brought back and it was for the council, we will be bringing back the events. Is there anything else that should be added on? I think we're good with this one. Okay. Then we'll schedule the meeting for next month. I always look at Julia because her availability. The 22nd or the 29th. I have an extra day.
Do either.
Which one?
You guys want till the 29th, so that we get the work done on that's fine. Thinking.
Okay, we'll go with the 29th. Okay, the next meeting will be May 29th at 4 o'clock here in the same room. With that being said, it's 4:40 and the meeting is adjourned.